right, good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the events manager here at NCIA, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to another episode in our members-only Fireside Chats with NCIA's Government Relations Team series. If you're just joining us, please be aware we'll be conducting Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation, so please pose any questions to the board by pressing that Q&A button that you'll see on the bottom of the toolbar in Zoom. Even if you don't have any questions yourself, stop on into the Q&A area throughout the session, and if you see another which will contribute to the conversation, give it an upvote to send it to the top of the feed. Now, let's dive into today's session. In last month's edition of NCIA's Fireside Chats, our government relations team were joined by Representatives Lou Correa and Earl Blumenauer to discuss veterans access issues. This month, they'll talk with Representative Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, Tanner Daniel of American Bankers Association, and Jack Jacobson with Thompson & Colburn LLP about various options for moving the Safe Banking Act forward and what it will take to get this legislation signed into law. Thank you all to the NCIA members in attendance today for joining us. And with that, please enjoy today's session being moderated by none other than Michelle Rutter-Freeberg and Michael Correa, the Deputy Director and Director of Government Relations here at NCIA. You've got the room, Mike and Michelle. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for joining in. Hopefully this is all set up properly. One, we have the Congressman. I think he's in the process of logging in shortly, so he'll be in, and we'll get to some questions with him. But first, one, I want to thank all the other guests and attendees on this, and we'll just start getting to questions first of all. And one, I just wanted to mention, when you do legislation in DC, truly successful, long-lasting legislation is bipartisan in nature, and it has coalitions behind it. And when we've been working on this bill, it wasn't just marijuana. We never framed this as a marijuana bill. It was always a banking bill. It was always a safety bill. There were other issues because the marijuana issue is a thornier issue on Capitol Hill, and we tried to stay away from that. We've looked at this issue, and until you reschedule cannabis and get it off of Schedule 1 on the Controlled Substances Act, DOJ is always going to be playing around with this. There's always going to be issues. The Safe Banking Act won't be an end-all, be-all. It'll be sort of a step into it. And one, I want to talk to some of our guests first. And Tanner Daniel, when I first worked with the American Bankers Association, we had reached out years ago. And your office basically said, listen, we look at this as a regional issue. It's not up on the national agenda yet. Work with our Colorado bankers, work with some of the other bankers. And one of these days it'll get up to, a national level. I want you to sort of talk about the genesis of the change. It was 2 years ago, I think you polled some of your members, and this was like topic number one. So if you wanted to talk about that, the transformation of the bankers on this issue.
Yeah, happy to do so. And good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for those on the East Coast. Mike, Michelle, thanks for having me. Just quick introduction myself, Tanner Daniel with the American Bankers Association. I've been the lead Dem lobbyist for them for the past year and a half. If you had told me, and before that I had a long tenure on the House Representative side working on financial services and have a background in banking. So if you had told me 2 years ago when I took this ABA job that I would all of a sudden become a cannabis lobbyist hanging out with people like Micah and Michelle, I would have probably laughed in your face, but here I am. So I think, Mike, to your question, the thing I would point out, and this is just the number that's beaten into our heads as a banking lobbyist when it comes to cannabis, is that threshold of 68% of all Americans, I think it was 33 states, that exists. I know the numbers probably changed as of late because we've had elections, but it's that tipping point of basically 68% of the entire country having some form of medical or recreational use being legalized. And we have, so just for background for folks who don't know ABA that well, we represent the entire banking industry. So that's 2 million employees. Our membership spans banks from large to small. It's 3,500 banks in total. That represents about 99% of the entire banking industry. So on the ground, our members were dealing with your companies, dealing with distributors, dealing with cannabis related businesses, and basically being forced to make very challenging choices about whether or not they want to take this risk on or provide the services that are needed for their community. So it was just the work that Mike, various other folks have been doing to push it at the state level that just we reached that tipping point. I don't want to share too much of the secret sauce of how ABA makes decisions, but really it was just that tipping point of north of 50% that pushed us to get to where we are today.
Come on, you can tell us. Hey, so Jack, thanks for coming along, Jack, and participating in this. I've known you for years. Previous to this, you had a client, the city of Denver, correct? And you were working on the banking issue for many years, working on this. So if you want to just talk about sort of the background of the banking issue and what you guys are working on right now.
Yeah, and thank you, first of all, for your advocacy and for allowing me to join this conversation today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't wish everyone a happy Pride. My husband and I are very proud to be a part of this movement. He's a doctor, and we have a lot of interesting conversations around particularly access to medical cannabis, but it's something that is a constant source of conversation in our home and with our friends and family. I did get into this industry through representing the city and county of Denver, Colorado. They did not have a footprint in DC and wanted to get engaged on federal cannabis policy. It was the mayor, Mayor Hancock, did not want legalization in his city or state, but once it did, he wanted to focus on health and safety, and banking access and safety go hand in hand. So that's what really started me out. I'm an energy lobbyist by trade. And at the time I was the youngest person on the team, and so they said, Jack, you're young, why don't you take cannabis? And I said, sure. And I'm glad I did. This is a really interesting new policy area, and we are breaking ground every day. And what's really exciting to me is to see the maturity of this movement where, the traditional cannabis folks are now getting married with the banking folks. And that's where we're able to build these coalitions to really get the attention of the Hill and to say, this is an industry that you need to pay attention to. This is an industry that's growing, and this is an industry that needs some attention from lawmakers on the Hill and within and regulators within agencies. So go ahead.
No, Jack, I was going to say, I think you bring up a really, really good point. Mike and I, working for NCIA, we come at this from the side of, we're working to advance cannabis policy. Our focus is on cannabis policy broadly, whether that's banking or 280E or what have you. Both you and Tanner are coming at this from the non-cannabis side of things, and like you said, I think there's an argument to be made, especially when you're, thinking probably about some of our friends on the Republican side. It's a very different conversation that you're having when you're talking to a lobbyist who may be an energy lobbyist by trade, right? Or maybe a lobbyist for bankers versus a cannabis lobbyist. So I know you guys aren't, by trade, as you would say, cannabis lobbyists, but I would love to hear sort of how it's been for you all coming at this from the side of not being necessarily, you guys aren't there to say cannabis is great or it's evil. You're there, to talk about this issue specifically. How has that been here in DC for you guys?
I could start. Sorry, Jack. I'll start, and then you pass it over to you. I'll just quickly say, again, bankers are typically Republican-leaning folks, and the most amount of the members we traditionally align with, for the most part, are Republican, districts, Republican states. So I think with this particular issue, I think it really stems from a comment Mike opened up with, which is we really just saw a need on the ground over safety, concern over tax collection. Another concern not many people talk about, but also has been incorporated in our talking points when we talk to Republicans, is we don't have any sense of how much this industry is impacting the economies of your local districts or states. So until we, bring you into the banking system, we're not going to be able to fully assess the impact this industry is having on the economy. I love, again, I'm the Democratic lobbyist for ABA, but when I talk to my Republican colleagues, I think I love talking about this issue as a perfect case study of what happens when there's a part of the industry that does not have access to banks. You end up with this cash-only system, and there's just a myriad of problems, whether it's getting loan, getting, Scott's fertilizer to contract with. I mean, it's incredible how important it is at the banking industry. So that's the way we would frame it to Republicans. And it really resonated because, again, there is nothing that Mr. Perlmutter's bill does to take us towards legalization. It says, hey, the states, like, you've made these decisions, let's let them have their sovereignty in making those decisions. Like, this bill is incredibly narrowly focused to just be about, hey, what is it about the proceeds that come from these sales, and can we take those deposits in without being mucked up with anti-money laundering laws at the federal level. So, and
then for me, sort of coming at this from the cannabis angle, right? But seeing that there was a disconnect about 2 years ago between the cannabis lobbyists and the financial services, Becky Dansky and I formed an advocacy organization, the Safe and Responsible Banking Alliance. We weren't aligned with the bankers, we weren't aligned with cannabis companies. What we were doing is trying to be an independent voice to say, this is a public policy issue that lawmakers can focus on, and we're independent advocates that aren't advocating for banks, we're not advocating for cannabis, we are just trying to fix a problem that is systemic in this industry. And then we can be honest brokers when we go into either a House or, either a Democrat or a Republican office, and really focus on the meat of the policy. And we don't have all that clutter about where we come from and who we're really shilling for, to use a derogatory term. We're just there to solve a problem. And we've made such great strides in the past year and a half to get an overwhelming vote on the House floor, to get a hearing in the Senate Banking Committee. These are enormous steps forward, and we're just so proud to be a part of this advocacy effort that is really gaining strength.
Yeah, and I will pat myself on the back and say we're doing a lot of good work, and we've been doing a lot of good work, but even I'm realistic enough to know that I'm not going to snap my fingers and get Congress to start doing hearings on something like that. It's going to be broad coalitions pushing for something. And, the bankers have been around since the beginning of time. They've been lobbying. They have those established networks and contacts and relationships. Cannabis, even though I'm the grandfather of this and been around since 2013, so far back, it is so fairly new. And it is still, we're still developing these relationships and developing the reach. And, I don't even hide the fact that when Senator Michael Crapo, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, does a hearing on banking, he's not doing it for me. He's not doing it for cannabis. He's doing it for the broader financial services aspect, the banking aspect. It's an issue that he's hearing about it from non-cannabis people. And one, I don't know if you Tanner, want to sort of mention like what you guys do, what your members do as far as outreach or lobbying, and what your strategy is on how you're reaching out to some of these congressional offices.
No, thank you for that. I was just about to jump in because that was a perfect setup to, not to pat myself on the back or ABA's selves on the back, but we employ 2.2 million Americans. So we have a very extensive grassroots network that also includes the state associations of all 50 states. So whenever we deploy our resources, whether it's submitting a grassroots alert again to 2.2 million Americans saying call your member of Congress, they call their member of Congress saying you need to do this. But not only that, we also leverage, again, we have the Colorado Bankers Association, who we're kind of working hand in hand with folks, and they're on the grounds talking to the members back home in district, bringing the the cannabis businesses in joint meetings with them to their district offices. So we're not only, what I do is just at the federal level, and I'm on the ground every day talking to folks about our top issues, but really I think it's that grassroots power of 2.2 million hardworking Americans who, again, are on the front lines, seeing what's happening in their communities and realizing, hey, this is a real problem. This is a safety problem. This is a problem that having all this cash on the streets is just not something that they want in their community. So again, when you get the bankers revved up about something, we have the pop behind our punch to kind of move things along and get Mr. Crapo to listen to us. So
hey, I want a quick follow-up. So I don't think that SAFE is an end-all be-all. There are a lot of issues we have to work out. I'm not a banker, but are the bankers pretty confident? Does this give them more certainty to where they're comfortable jumping in on this, or there's still some hesitation if SAFE were to pass? I would love to hear like the banker perspective on, the day after SAFE passes, what is their mindset?
No, I mean, from the get-go, we've made it very clear to all of our all of our members that you are more than likely, even if you make the decision not to bank cannabis related, like you are more than likely involved in this in some way, shape, or form, which is why we need to pass safe banking to provide that certainty about the proceeds in the cannabis related businesses so that you're protected against federal lawsuits or actions from the DOJ or from the Treasury Department. To your question, I think, there are a number of our members who have made that risk calculation and recognize that the enforcement actions coming from not just the previous administration, when we saw the Cole memo, as everyone can probably recall, come out, and also the FinCEN 2014 guidance, that provided a little bit of certainty for some of our members to jump in, even without the clarity at the federal level. But even in this administration, we've not, the level of enforcement actions on this particular issue isn't tremendous. Do I see like all 3,500 ABA members day one of President Trump signing this into law, hopefully President Biden signing into law next year, maybe too? No, I do not see that. Do I see a bunch of board of directors having a very serious conversation about their risk appetite and profile, and again, wanting to serve their communities? That discussion will happen the next day. And I think it would transition into, a good chunk of our members saying, hey, let's jump into this. This is a smart step. So. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. Hey, so Jack, one, I want to give you props, and Becky, Becky Dansky had a long career for Marijuana Policy Project, been working on this issue for many years. Work with you on this is always great working with her. Really appreciate working with you. But I don't know if you want to sort of talk about, either what you're hearing from members, what they're looking for, like where's their comfort level. I'm assuming you have people who are, I think, there's this gray area where everyone knows it's happening. Some of them are doing it. I think SAFE provides that first layer of certainty that people are looking for, that someone's not going to go after them. Like the federal government has said this is okay, but I don't know if you want to talk about what sort of your members are thinking or what you're hearing as far as, safety, certainty, the need for this.
Hey, Mike, I didn't want to, sorry to interrupt, but I think that we've got the congressman here. He's calling in from a 303 number. So I did just.
Are you there?
I'm here.
There we go.
Hey, Congressman Ed Perlmutter, one, really appreciate you calling in. I know you have a busy schedule. I know the life of a congressman. So any time you need to jump off, just give us a couple minutes notice and we'll wind it down and hassle you just a little more. But thanks for joining. And one, we've been having some good chats. I don't know if you can, you're calling in so you can't see the video, but Tanner Daniel with the Bankers Association, Jack Jacobson with SARBA, and working at Thompson Coburn on this issue. Michelle and I just really appreciate you calling in And one, before I give you the mic, I want to say, I've been doing this since 2013. You introduced the first version of marijuana businesses access to banking act in 2013. Your staff, Noah, your staff, Colin, Ashley, everyone has been wonderful. I can't say enough of how great your staff is. This is staff driven. They've been wonderful on this. And so one, appreciate it, but I want to give you a question. I've been talking to, Democratic members for years, and a couple years ago, I thanked a Democratic member from Washington State, and I said, thank you for your support. And he said, I don't support you. And it was the weirdest thing, because you sort of instinctively think that all Democrats are supportive, all Republicans are opposed, just, naturally. And this is an evolution. I just want, the first question I just wanted to throw out at you is just the evolution you've personally gone through and what you've seen on Capitol Hill over these past years, and sort of going forward what we're thinking. So thank you for joining.
Sure. No, thanks, Michael. And I apologize to you and to all those participating. I'm sure there was some user error going on my part, and I just was struggling a little bit to get in. But let's talk about it. So I think, and you've heard me mention this before, but I'll say it. When I first started with what was the precursor to the Safe Banking Act back in 2013. And I would raise the issue of marijuana and banking to the Financial Services Committee, or to anybody generally. I was met with what I call the chuckle factor. Everybody would kind of chuckle that I was bringing this up, and they'd say, oh, you're from Colorado, you're a mile high. There was always a joke kind of attached to it, and, everybody'd smile if I brought it up, but I kept bringing it up. And then Denny Heck from the state of Washington joined me in this effort. And the two of us, were persistent to say, look, this is really an issue. The states are way ahead of the federal government on this subject, and we got to catch up. And we knew, particularly with Jeb Hensarling, Republican chair of the Financial Services from Texas, that we were running just straight into a roadblock. So together with the industry, we approached the Obama administration, and we worked with both the Treasury and the Justice Department and the White House, which then resulted in the Cole memo and the FinCEN guidance. So it was, again, a big team effort, but we kept going and were persistent. And pretty soon those chuckles went away, because folks saw this was serious business. This was a real issue. And it was no longer, some kind of a Cheech and Chong kind of laughing matter, that this was something that the people, so most of this has been driven not from, the elected official or the politician down, but from the people up. And, that's resulted in 47 or, however many states it is, has some level of marijuana, legal marijuana use, CBD or hemp or whatever. It's gone from the chuckle factor to now we passed the Safe Banking Act out of the House of Representatives twice. Once as a standalone bill, and you all were key to the advocacy on this, and that resulted in 321 to 99. Almost every single Democrat except one, and 90 plus Republicans. So it was very bipartisan. And I got to give Steve Stivers, especially, and Warren Davidson, Republicans from Ohio, a lot of credit in bringing and advocating and lobbying, in effect, for the bill on the Republican side of the aisle. So it's been an evolution. It's gone from the chuckle factor to overwhelming majority passing it in the House as a standalone bill, and then it's part of the HEROES Act. So it's people realize this is serious, that there's cash, the cash is generated.
Uh-oh, Congressman, your signal's going in and out a little bit, just as a heads up.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You were good at first. So
you're good right there. I don't know if you're in the Capitol or not.
I am in the Capitol. Well, I'm in
Don't move.
Longworth. I
Don't
apologize.
move. You sound perfect right there.
Okay, well, I was on a roll too. So the bottom line is there's been a huge evolution. And I think, and I wish Jeff Merkley were on this call or part of this Zoom, because I'd like to find out what's going on in the Senate. We've got good sponsors over there in Merkley and Michael Bennett and Cory Gardner, and I'd sure like to see them either pass the standalone or make it part of a bigger package. But they have two shots at it, and I'll leave it at that and answer questions. And I'm sorry for the technical difficulties and that I've caused you guys.
No, you sound great. You sound great.
No, you sound great, Congressman, and you bring up a great point. We were really hoping that Senator Merkley was going to be able to join us today as well. His schedule unfortunately didn't allow, but hopefully we can do maybe another one of these soon and have you both on. But Congressman, you bring up a great point. Like you said, everybody, I think for the most part, participating in this webinar today is aware of the fact that, you know, the standalone bill of safe banking passed the House in September on a suspension vote, overwhelming majority, like you mentioned, 321 to 103. But what I want to talk about or ask you is something that I think people don't get to hear about. And I'm just, you know, also personally curious is you and your staff were working really, really hard behind the scenes up to that moment. I want to give another shout out and moment of appreciation to Colin on the Congressman's team, who's, I think, listening into this webinar. Can't say thank you enough. Everybody on this call should be thanking Colin for safe banking passing out of the House. He did so much work with this along with the Congressman. But you and Colin and everybody were working really hard behind the scenes leading up to that vote. And I'm curious, you know, can you tell our listeners a little bit about, you know, what was happening behind the scenes at that moment? You know, were there any surprising conversations? You know, you mentioned the chuckle factor. We're all aware of that too. But, you know, were there any surprising conversations or insights you had in the lead up to that vote? And, you know, because this bill was passed under suspension, we did have to have such a large margin. Was there ever a moment where you were nervous that we weren't gonna make it? What was it like?
Yes, there were a lot of moments of anxiety on this bill. So going back to the committee hearing, I think there was a surprise when it passed out of financial services with all the Democrats and 14 or 15 Republicans. And that was a surprise that it was as bipartisan coming out of that committee as it was. We did not expect those numbers. Probably 4 or 5 Republicans is what we expected. And I thought I was going to lose some Democrats. So that was a substantial vote. There was a lot of give and take, and I think the amendments that we made in committee actually, you know, enhanced the bill, made the bill better, and it got me more votes, or it got the bill more votes. So that was surprise number one. Then surprise number two, I was comfortable that we could pass it on the floor, but I was not looking to have to go through a suspension for that. And then the majority leader said, well, you better work and you better get enough for suspension, because that's how you're going to have to bring it to the floor. And then the advocacy, you all, the bankers, you know, the insurance people, the financial services sector generally, then we got the attorneys general and the treasurers and a number of state organizations to help us advocate. And I got to give credit to my team. My team was all the staff of Denny Heck, Steve Stivers, and Warren Davidson, and my staff, and you mentioned Colin, and we all went to work and worked like crazy. And when it was brought up, I was hoping we were going to get to 290, which is what you need for a suspension passage, and we got to 321. That was a big surprise, and a lot of folks who I thought were not going to be supportive turned out they voted yes, and I'm still surprised by some of those.
Absolutely. And Congressman,
Hello?
no, you're here. I think you bring up such a
Okay.
good point about some of those amendments that were added in committee that actually ended up making the bill even stronger. You know, one of those amendments was requiring the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, to require a study about minority and women-owned cannabis businesses, which, you know, we all believe, I think, was the first step. But, you know, Congressman, I'd also love to hear if you have any input too on, you know, just on how the Safe Banking Act itself, you know, is in and of itself, I think, a diversity and equity bill, because, you know, the financial and practical hardships that face legal cannabis businesses disproportionately affect minority business owners. And then, you know, without that access to capital from traditional financial institutions, we have people of color who are often left without access to the funding necessary to participate in the legal cannabis market. Then you have state equity licensees who may fall prey to predatory business arrangements and desperate bids to secure the capital necessary to maintain and operate these businesses. So, you know, Congressman, I just want to say thank you too, because I think that this bill is incredibly important for a multitude of reasons, for public safety, for public health. But I also think that one of the issues that isn't getting talked about enough, and that I'm really trying to highlight with everything right now that's going on in the world, is how the Safe Banking Act actually directly is going to impact minority-owned businesses and entrepreneurs of color who want to get involved in this space. And I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add to that on that point, but I just think it's such an important thing to bring up.
No, and you've described it very well. And one of the groups in support and testified at the hearing was the minority cannabis business owners. We're supportive of this, and there's a diversity and inclusion section to the bill that was added during the committee. And, you know, the one thing that Mitch McConnell has complained about over on the Senate side, picking a section out of the bill, is the diversity and inclusion. So I think he's just wrong on that. But we need to, because we've seen that people of color have been disproportionately hurt in sort of stings and actions against people who've used marijuana or sold marijuana or any of that sort of stuff. So we need to bring this bill and the Senate into this century. I think that they will be supportive of pretty much all the provisions, and I wouldn't be opposed if over on the Senate side they added a testing and a study component so that we really could have good methodical science attached to this whole piece of legislation, so that the universities, all of them, not just, you know, one or two in Mississippi or wherever they are, really can study this and make sure that whether it's edibles or you know, different kinds of you know, products are what they say they are, so that people know what they're getting. And I would see that as a very positive change if the Senate wanted to do that.
Yeah, I know when the Energy and Commerce had their committee had their hearing, and they brought up the government witnesses. We know the government can stall as much as they want on this issue, and it's going to be up to Congress to constantly push and get more information. But one, I want to talk politics. I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You know, when I worked on the House side, we always joked that the Senate was there to kill all the legislation that we pass, and nothing has changed in all these years. And so, one, Cory Gardner, he's your senator. He's Colorado. He's up for re-election. Have you been having conversations with him? You know, what has he been saying? I mean, I'm assuming he's sort of been our entree into the Republican side, as, you know, what are Republicans thinking? You know, because, you know, there's basically Chairman Michael Crapo and then Mitch McConnell. Those are the two biggest, I think, impediments to getting something moving forward. But I would just love to hear if you've heard any conversations either through Gardner or just the Colorado side of what you think. You know, we're always looking for, you know, that choke point, or what's the slope where we as advocates can work on them. But would love to hear, you know, your thoughts on just, you know, Gardner or the Colorado aspect, or where we need to go, because we're scratching our heads. Is it Mitch McConnell? Is it Chairman Crapo? Is it every Republican? We'd just love to hear your thoughts.
So I guess I can, you know, describe some of my conversations with Cory. So both of my senators are prime sponsors of the legislation. So Michael Bennet and Cory Gardner. And then Jeff Merkley is the chief sponsor. And as I said, I'm sorry he's not on this call because we could get a better, look into how the Senate is perceiving this were he around. So you guys need to make sure you stay in touch with him. But Cory has been actually pretty optimistic in conversations that I've had with him about the legislation. And he has said that he's had conversations with the White House, and the White House has been, supportive of the legislation. And I feel like in the committee hearings we've had and in the conversations I've had with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, it's been generally pretty positive too. So, I think you're right. McConnell and Crapo have been the holdups here. And I don't know, obviously I'm a Democrat, they're Republicans, I'm a House member, they're senators. I don't know what makes them tick. And I was hoping, Gardner's in a very hotly contested Senate race this year. We've got a primary on the Democratic side that'll be decided Tuesday between John Hickenlooper and Andrew Romanoff. I think Hickenlooper wins that thing. And then I think he will, unless Cory is able to succeed on something like the Cannabis, the Safe Banking Act, or some other things, I think John is going to give him a heck of a run for his money, and so will Andrew. So, there is some politics. It's an election year, but forget about that. Gardner has been pretty optimistic about this, and he has said to me that he thinks he's got 60 votes were it to get to the floor. Now, all of you have been advocating and lobbying over there. You'll have a better idea of that if that's true or not. But I think that this thing can get passed. And somebody asked me, when I told him I thought the bill was going to be part of the HEROES Act because Nancy Pelosi was supportive, I got a lot of, it's not going to happen, and, the eyeballs rolling. Well, it did become part of the HEROES Act. And I give this thing 50-50 chance over in the Senate, but I'm going to put the burden on all of you that you've got a lot of advocating that still has to be done.
Senator Rand Paul said the same thing to me, where he says the votes are there, but getting it to the floor, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge until you get a committee chair signing off on it, until you get Leader McConnell saying it's okay. That's going to be, something we're going to have to deal with. And so, Tanner and Jack, I don't know if you want to ask the congressman. I don't want to take all the time, but while he's here, I don't know if you want to throw a question out or anything, or say how great their office is. Feel free, because Michelle and I will consume all the oxygen in the room. We want to make sure you guys get a word in.
Hey, Congressman, this is I'm happy to jump in, Tanner, with ABA.
Tanner, how are you?
I saw the Colorado Rockies center outfielder Charlie Blackmon tested positive for COVID-19. So I this morning. So yeah. My first question is, how are the Rockies going to do now with their all-star on the sidelines? Baseball's back, though.
Well,
yeah,
baseball is coming back. Blackmon is one of our key guys. And it was disappointing to see that. I mean, in Colorado, we really, we had an early spike, not to the degree of New York or anything else, but because of all of our ski resorts, there were a lot of international visitors, and we got hit early and we got hit hard. And then we've really worked hard to suppress it, and we've been doing a good job until the last couple weeks. We've had a little bit of a flare-up, so everybody's got to keep an eye on this thing.
Yeah, but more serious question. I think we're all reading the rumors that, there's going to be COVID negotiations for another round of packages after the July 4th break. In your conversations with House leadership, is that I know we saw a letter late last week from Senator Merkley and a couple other senators urging Mr. McConnell to, take on some COVID package before 4th of July. Are you optimistic at all that conversations might begin before 4th of July, or do you think it's going to be just kind of the end of July is going to be the marker that pushes stuff across the board?
So let's talk about marijuana, cannabis with respect to COVID. So we proposed with Blumenauer, some others, that marijuana businesses be able to have access to the Paycheck Protection Program and a number of the other emergency funding measures because, one, there's thousands and thousands of businesses. I think you guys gave me the number of 243,000 employees in the industry, and we want to make sure that there aren't a lot of layoffs and that, again, a legitimate business is able to get access to some of this capital. So we're going to continue to press that, and the fact is that we need to get cash out of this because potential of transmission. So I think that, well, there are discussions underway right now with respect to chunks of the HEROES Act, and that's the state and local government and school district backfilling of revenue because of tax losses that are going to hurt the states and local governments so badly. I think there's a big housing component that has to be considered both from a tenant's point of view and a landlord's point of view. There's a commercial real estate component to it, again, from a tenant's point of view and landlords. So these discussions are underway. Why McConnell and the Senate, is on this one particular time track, I don't know, because we are not out of the woods when it comes to the recession. And, the ABA and, a lot of financial institutions are watching this very closely. We were able to cushion the first blow of this pandemic to the economy, but we're still, in Colorado, we went from 2.5% unemployment to we're a little over 10. Most of the country is anywhere between 13 and 16% unemployment, which is higher than at any time after the recession in 2008. We got a lot of work to do, so there still is going to be some COVID economic legislation coming, and I hope it comes quicker and not to the end of July, but something's going to happen, and it'll be significant. And then there's a big infrastructure piece, which the White House wants and the House Democrats, and I think the House Republicans want it as well. We'll see what kind of infrastructure package ultimately gets to the president's desk, but I think there's a good chance of passing that too.
And we know politicians love jobs, and we love job creation. And here we have, hundreds of thousands of potential, green jobs coming out. I think it is really important. The cannabis industry has struggled just like everyone else with this. But I do think we don't need special favors, but at the same time, we need it. All we've been saying for years is treat us like every other small business. So many states have deemed this essential. You've worked so hard to make sure that was included in the HEROES package. Really appreciate that. Hey, Jack, I don't know if you wanted to chime in and ask a question or say anything, or just say some thoughts.
Yeah, I'd love to. Congressman Jack Jacobson with Thompson Coburn. I was Dina's intern, and Abby was my intern at various points. So very happy to be on this panel with you. My question is, you've gotten a lot of support from Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer, and I think we've got two major bites of the apple, right? We've got a COVID relief bill that this could fit really well and elegantly into, and then we've got perhaps an end of year catch-all lame duck that this could fit into. To what degree are they going to push Mitch McConnell on this? I know you've got a great team with you. I've loved working with Colin and Ashley, and want to make sure that we're giving you the support with your leadership to really advocate for this provision long term.
Well, you have been. I mean, the team that was put together through the financial services industry, Brink's Armored Car, the cannabis industry, generally the team was remarkable, and it has to continue to advocate as a team if we want to see this as part of the COVID package, another package, or as a standalone bill that maybe gets wrapped up in some other stuff at the end of the year. I mean, we added hemp during the markup in committee as a potential thing of interest for McConnell, because the banking piece of it still isn't crystal clear. And we could clear up some of that with the Safe Banking Act. So we tried to put something in there that would be attractive to the majority leader, and we'll see, whether he moves. But the teamwork among all of the organizations has been substantial, and it's been required because, remember, the Safe Banking Act is the first piece of marijuana legislation that has standalone, authority, authorizing kind of legislation that's been passed since 1971 or whatever it was, when marijuana was placed and anything with THC was placed on the controlled substance list. And so it's some 50 years ago, and we got it out of the House, and it's going to take that same kind of teamwork to push it through the Senate and get it to the president's desk.
So, Juan, I know we're getting up on time and we may have some questions, but first, Juan, I wanted to personally give a shout out to Ian Sieb. Ian Sieb was our board of directors on NCIA. Worked with the industry for many years, and he's Governor Polis's marijuana czar. And so it's just being able to have someone on the other side who actually understands this issue is really willing to fight for it. But Congressman, I wanted to ask you a question. You go around your district, you go around the state. I'm sure you talk to, like parents groups or healthcare workers or someone out there. Do you get any pushback on this issue, or is this pretty much like, do they understand? We've never made this a marijuana issue. It's always been a safety issue. It's always been a banker issue. But on this issue, do people get it? Have you ever gotten pushback on this where you had doubts on this issue, or you just got positive feedback on this issue?
I've really not had a lot of pushback, Michael. Initially, Colorado passed our medical marijuana initiative. Now, remember, everything that I'm saying nationwide, but Colorado, it's all been from the grassroots up. And so we passed our medical marijuana initiative, I want to say in 2000. And so it was a people-generated initiative. And it passed sizably. Then it passed, the people passed the recreational marijuana use for all adults in 2012. Again, it was a people's initiative, and I supported the medical one, but I actually had opposed our Amendment 64, which made it recreational. But again, on a 60-40 vote, the people of Colorado said, this is what we're doing. And so for me, there's always been general support in the state. And there's been a little pushback here or there, but really not much at all. It's been much more supportive.
Hey, Michelle, do you have
a
question? Yeah, we're there.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
Good.
So we have just about 10 minutes or so left. So I think I want to switch gears a little bit and give our attendees an opportunity to ask some questions. So to all of our attendees, you can drop a question in the chat box, in the Q&A feature. One of the greatest parts of these webinars is not only getting to hear from Congressman Ed Perlmutter, but is actually being able to interact with him. So make sure you get those questions in. It wasn't necessarily a question I wanted to ask you, Congressman, but just if you had any thoughts or feedback about this. We had one question about where does former Vice President Joe Biden stand on the cannabis issue? And so I went ahead and dropped a link in for our attendee, Eric, there to for him to read about. And the short answer is that former Vice President Biden is maybe not where you'd expect on this issue. He is more a proponent of decriminalization than descheduling cannabis. And so a little bit out of step with some of the other members of his party, and definitely, like Tanner mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, definitely out of step with a good chunk of the American public. You know, we have over 90% who agree with medical cannabis, which former Vice President Biden, to be clear, does agree with medical cannabis, but again, just not all the way there on adult use. So Congressman Perlmutter, I would just love to hear if you have any thoughts. I'm not sure if this is, I'm not sure if this is a topic that maybe you've broached with the former Vice President, but I would just love to hear if you have any thoughts on this and just about the party in general and this issue and the election coming up.
Well, it's a very good question, and I have not had this conversation with the vice president. I think that, like so many, you know, who have had to kind of deal with sort of the political and legislative side of this, this is an evolution for him. And I think that when he wins this race against the president, that he will be a supporter of what we're trying to do, whether it's the Safe Banking Act or so many things that we have in the hopper on the House side, you know, the MORE Act being the most comprehensive of all of them. But he's going to be, I think, supportive of this. This isn't really his area. I mean, he's a foreign policy person. He's a, you know, he's a generalist in his approach to politics. And this is one where I think we can bring him along, and he's come a long way as it is. And I think we'll find him to be supportive when the time is right.
Michelle, one, do we need to end? Do we have questions up we want to ask? Do we want to get to? You want to ask, or because I have one more question for the congressman. So, and
well, let me ask you, Wade. I want to ask you guys a couple questions.
Oh, please do. I love getting asked questions.
Yeah. So, and I really was hoping that Merkley would be on this thing because you all are in touch with different senators and have been, you know, working on this subject since we passed the bill last fall. So tell me what you think is happening over on the Senate side, and you know, is there something from the House? I mean, we passed it to them twice.
Yeah.
I sit on the Rules Committee. If something comes over from the Senate that they want to get passed, maybe we tack the bill onto their legislation coming from the Senate. But what do you think is happening on the Senate side?
So one, and we did invite Senator Merkley. There was just a scheduling issue. We thought it would be a home run getting both you guys on. So sorry, scheduling, you know, House, Senate, you know how that works. One, just on my personal view, you know, the Senate tends to be older. The Senate tends to be a little more traditional. A lot of the guys, I don't think have personally formed in one representing one district in Colorado versus representing an entire state, I think are slow. You look at the map, most of the states that have done recreational adult use retail tend to be bluer states. You look at the red states. Who's a senator from a red state that has legalized? Maybe Maine, maybe Arizona, maybe Alaska. So there's
Alaska.
There's very limitations on how many Republicans are going to jump forward and say, hey, this is happening in my state, I want to do it. But I know we have had these conversations. We have the industry, the advocates, you know, Senator Crapo asked questions that he wanted addressed. And I know a lot of the bankers, the industry advocates responded to that. Senator Paula said it to me, the votes are there. I'm just waiting what is the grease that releases, whether it's Crapo, and COVID changed everything. You know, if COVID didn't happen, where would we be? I know their minds are maybe on something else. But I don't know if, Michelle, you want to jump in on any conversations you've had. We're sort of on a wait and see right now.
Yeah.
We've given Senator Crapo almost everything he asked for. Every conversation we've had with Banking Committee is sort of, yes, you know, some of them, I think, you know, the potency issue may be a poison pill. But, Michelle, I don't know if you want to jump in, but we're sort of wait and see right now.
Yeah, no, Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head. Just like everything, COVID changed everything, and this is no different. So I think that you're completely right. And I agree with the congressman too. I was sort of the same mindset of, it might be a little bit more difficult to pass this as a standalone bill, that maybe the avenue forward was to attach it to a larger package, something that must pass, and then obviously, we kind of have that avenue going forward with the HEROES Act. And I agree with you, Mike. I think it's just yet to be seen about what sort of is going to be the release here. And I would love for Tanner and Jack to jump in on this if you guys have thoughts. But the last thing I'll say on this is just, I think that you're correct that, the big thing here as well is that we as an industry and as an association have a responsibility to address those concerns that Chairman Crapo put out back in December. I know that wasn't what we wanted to see. I know it wasn't what many in the industry wanted to see, but the fact of the matter is that there are people in Congress and people all over the country who have concerns about this issue, who are not in the same place that maybe you or I are at, and are ready to open the floodgates of legalization. And we have to be willing as advocates to sort of meet them in the middle there. So what I think is next, and Jack, maybe you can talk about this, is as an industry is sort of allaying those concerns and talking through those fears. Tanner, I know the ABA replied back to Chairman Crapo's concerns. NCIA and other organizations are doing that right now. We're talking about things like the potency issue. We're talking about things like interstate commerce. Obviously, it's, it can be difficult to find that balance between what is a very conservative Republican senator from Idaho want and what is also something that is going to be agreeable to the cannabis industry. And so that's where I think we have our work cut out for us. I think, it's yet to be seen. I don't have, just like all of us, it's yet to be seen what happens with COVID, especially, and then throw an election year into it. We all have our work cut out for us. But that's sort of where I think are the next steps. And then Jack, Tanner, I don't know if you guys want to jump in with any last thoughts here.
Sure, I'll jump in. The chairman's concerns that he laid out in December are real concerns, and we have to be responsive to that. And I think there are two different proposals before the banking committee that have been presented to staff, but not necessarily to the committee members, but to staff, that would address, if not all of the concerns, the great majority of the concerns he raised in December. So I think there are paths forward for the committee, even if the committee, it's a really tough committee. The folks are from Alabama and South Carolina, and the chairman's from Idaho, and none of these states are really where we really need them to be. So it's a really tough committee. That said, I think that the analysis that you can get to 60 votes on the Senate floor is absolutely true. So what we need to do is we need to work to get Mr. Crapo to a place where he agrees to some language and some changes that he'll sign off on to get included in a larger package. I think that's the best chance that we have this year. And I think that there is a path forward.
Good.
Hey, Tanner, any thoughts on that before we start winding down?
No, I would just say stay focused. Mr. Perlmutter and Colin were able to get 91 Republicans in the House to vote yes because we stayed focused. We stayed in our lane. We didn't at all encroach on legalization, even though most of the country's there. I just don't think Congress is there yet. So the more that we can do to educate folks like Miss McSally in Arizona, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska about kind of what their banks are experiencing. Ed shares a great story about him watching dispensary carrying bags of cash to the tax collector. I love that story. And the burden that puts on the Colorado revenue service to be able to count all of those dollars. I mean, those are the types of stories we need to be focused and sharing. So
yeah, and I hate to say it, we just need more states legalizing to where more senators want to stand up for their state. And so, Congressman, I know we're going to be ending shortly. One, appreciate your time. You've given us almost a whole hour. Can't thank your staff enough. They've been wonderful. And just on a personal note, Congressman, my 6-year-old daughter is ready to go skiing with you again. She skied down the mountain last year as a 5-year-old, and she's ready to take you on next time you do your trip.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully it'll be a good year for snow, and we'll have COVID in the rearview mirror, and let's get this thing passed. And it really is a team effort between financial services, NCIA, the industry generally, the attorneys general, the treasurers. So many organizations have pulled behind getting this finished, and I like the caution that we need to stay focused. The potency piece, if we added a testing thing over on the Senate side, I think it just makes the bill better, and that's okay by me. But if we stay focused, and if everybody's persistent, not to the point where you just become a real nuisance, but don't be afraid to persist in this thing. And that's what we've been doing in the House. So pretty soon everybody said, okay, just get it here and we'll pass it. I think we got to be persistent over on the Senate side, and this thing will get passed, and it will help the industry. It will help the banking system. And I think eventually just will make this whole matter kind of go past, we'll let legitimate businesses be able to have legitimate banking services. And then we can start dealing too with sort of the racial and the diversity and inclusion piece of this thing, which is also key. But staying focused is a good admonition. And I thank you all very much.
I couldn't agree more. When I took this job, I thought it would be an 8 to 10 year process. I'm in year 7. I'm going to be there tomorrow. You know that it takes years and coalitions and bipartisan legislation to be truly successful. It's not going to end. NCIA is not going to leave tomorrow. They're not going to leave after this Congress. And regardless of if it's Chairman Crapo in next year, or if it's Chairman something else, or Democrat, Republican, Democratic president, or Republican, we're going to still be educating and charging along and doing whatever we can to get this past the finish line. And it's because of people like you, Congressman, that make our job easier. So I can't say enough. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Ashley, thank you. Colin, thank you. And Michelle, giving a throw out to Princess Leia there. I can't say enough about Michelle, how wonderful she is. And Brian, if you want to take away and close. Thanks to everyone. Tanner, Jack, missing you guys. Hopefully do happy hour whenever this opens back up. So appreciate the time, guys.
Perfect. Fantastic. Michelle, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to wrap the panel up with, or do you want me to just close it out from here?
The only thing I want to make sure you mention, Brian, is about our equity applicant scholarships. But other than that, I'm all set.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that cue. I actually didn't have that planned in this outro, so thank you. For everybody that did not hear during our Cannabis Caucus cyber events the last few weeks, today we did just debut an equity scholarship program within NCIA. There's a great live stream video that's up on our Facebook that you can watch with our Director of Marketing and our DEI Coordinator, Tahir Johnson, talking more about the program. I believe the application period is going on for an entire month. It's the least that NCIA can do during these times to increase equity and ensure that everyone has equal access to all the benefits that NCIA membership provides. The scholarship program, obviously I didn't get touched on that, does basically includes a free year of NCIA membership for any social equity license holder across the United States. So head to our website to learn more about that. And if you are a social equity applicant or a license holder, please apply or share it around to your network. All right. We want to close today's webinar with a few teasers for some upcoming industry essential educational webinars that we've got on the calendar. As you'll see here, if you did have any additional questions for any of the panelists or the congressmen, there is contact information for office websites, as well as all the company contact information. So highly encourage all of you all to take your questions offline and follow up and reach out with all these great panelists and see how you can support their effort and work across the country. So now that our Cannabis Caucus Cyber Event series just wrapped up, as you all know, we're jumping right back into the thick of things with our online educational offerings. To close out the month, we'll be debuting our new Service Solutions series of Industry Essentials educational webinars next Monday. The Service Solutions series is our sponsored content webinar program, which will allow business owners the opportunity to learn more about premier products, services, and industry solutions directly from our network of established suppliers, providers, and thought leaders. In the inaugural Service Solutions webinar, we'll hear from members of the Cannabis Consortium, composed of vetted businesses aligned in support of the cannabis industry and its leaders from plant to product. During this conversation with established supply chain and compliance experts championing business resiliency, you'll gain insight into why and how consortiums and partnerships help with sharing resources, real supply chain projections post-COVID-19, how to verify vendors for your cannabis business, and an in-depth exploration of multiple case studies and real-world examples of why vendor verification and quality matters. This session is free for both NCIA members as well as non-members to attend. So if you haven't already, please head to NCIA's website to sign up today and invite as many of your colleagues throughout the industry who might be interested as well. And with that, thank you all so much for participating in another one of our members only Fireside Chat with Government Relations Team, series of Industry Essentials educational webinars. Huge thank you to all of our panelists. A special shout out to the Congressman for providing such a valuable update and his incredible, valuable time today, and all of our audience members and member businesses which made our work possible. Please complete the attendee survey after leaving the meeting room to gain immediate access to our presentation and exclusive 30-day access to a formatted video recording sent directly to your email inbox. Hope you all have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time for another Industry Essentials educational webinar. We'll leave you all with some audio stylings by the resident musician at our Colorado-based events, Kyle Leese, and SSDP Amplify Project artist, Indigo Sun. We have a little member montage thanking all of the members who participated in the event today. So stick around over the next minute to see yourself in the end credit sequence. And I hope you all have a great week and look forward to seeing you again for another NCIA digital event.